that leans mid-range to an extent, and you just want to play the most stuff possible each turn. But a 2-mana swipe, effectively, is just really efficient tempo and will probably be able to win you a lot of early game skirmishes when you factor in the weapons and the cannonballs as well that can be used to take out a lot of the remaining minions. But in this matchup specifically, Pikahara is only looking for the cleanest curve of pirates possible.
Yes, indeed. It's been something that I've been struggling with a little bit this tournament because, philosophically, I'm very much on board of aggro decks just being tuned to get on board and be ahead as often as consistently as possible and kind of cutting down on those removal options. This goes all the way back to, original classic standard Hearthstone when like aggro paladins and people will be saying, oh, why don't you run Consecration? It's like, well, because I'm going to be ahead and I don't want to draw Consecration and be behind on board. That is very much my philosophy when it comes to building aggro decks, but having seen this deck perform, I think one of its real benefits in this meta is that it hasn't automatically lost the game when an Anacondra board, for example, has come down, right? When there's been a Lord Barov available or something along those lines. That ability to fight a little bit longer, and it does speak a little bit to the fact that it's a deck that can go surprisingly long once it gets the Juggernaut online, right? Because of that insane amount of value. We even saw a game where Pirate Warrior was in the game for far longer than should have been expected against a Quest Shaman that was really controlling the state of the board very, very easily. And it wasn't until, 4 charged calls came down at the end of the game that Pirate Warrior finally fell away. So interesting, certainly, to see how this one will pan out, because in this matchup in particular, none of those removal options are going to be particularly relevant, and Pikahara, as you said, will just be looking for smooth, aggressive pirate curves.
An ugly draw, I will say, for Pikahara with the Whetstone Hatchet off the top is quite obviously you would rather get it off the quest, but it's not purely a detriment. He can start buffing up this Bloodsail Raider to very possibly get it down as a 4 or even 5 attack minion on the next turn as well, which is at the very least putting a check on Matty. It's saying, right, you can't just play Incantus Flow on turn 3 or Arcane Intellect on turn 3 and hope to be able to survive, because that is a lot of damage he's going to tank. And you do need to be afraid of being too low health versus this Pirate Warrior. The cannonballs start to rack up very quickly when you play almost no minions in your deck.
Like this curve from Matty, step 1, check. Playing the first flame on turn 1, probably with the indication of looking at Mini-Mage second flame on 3 mana here, and then looking to draw some cards from that point. Might be able to use the Mini-Mage on the subsequent turn to relieve a little bit of pressure. Like, if you think about expected curves from your opponent, which is something you should do, right? Like, 3 health minion here is relatively expected, Bloodsail Raider as you saw, and then, yes, thank you game, Hearthstone, your one plan comes together. The idea is that there'll then be quite often playing another 3 health minion, South Sea Captain being a premium example, on the next turn. You already have your stealth minion locked and loaded, ready to deal with that. So now, Matty will be free to trade into the next minion that comes down and just play card draw, just play Arcane Intellect on the following turn, if he chooses to do that, because he could still be even greedier and just hold on to the Mini-Mage for longer in stealth in this position. But I suppose Man the Cannons is actually a consideration in this spot in a way that it wouldn't usually be against this kind of deck.
Exactly, yeah. It's Man the Cannons. It's also the cannonballs themselves from either the quest completion or the Cannoneer. So I do think it would be smart here for Matty to just cash in the 3 damage, whether he goes with AI or the multicaster. But interestingly enough, he's just letting rip, which I think... oh no, draws him 2, sorry, not just the 1 because of the... Primordial, sorry, played at the start of the game.
Primordial Studies and the Flames have come down here, so it is still draw 2, which does make sense. Spends mana more effectively. Why draw 2 cards with the Arcane Intellect when you can draw 2 cards and get a 3/4 on board and Pheno use all at the same time?
Ooh, getting dicey. It's getting to that point for Pikahara where you're very much all in on the top decks. Because it's still okay for the moment. He can just spend all his mana if you factor the hero power in, which is not technically completely useless, but pretty useless in this situation. And then Anchorman hope to get more pirates on curve. It's almost the entirety of his deck now. He only has like 3 dead draws in the Timbers and the Man the Cannons. So he should still be on track, I think, for a turn 7 Rakara, maybe turn 8 if you're unlucky. But playing a 5-mana 7/7 on turn 7 or 8 is way too slow to be taking down a Mizaki Mage in most universes.
You would expect so, yes. Matty now really having the freedom to do basically whatever he likes this turn. Of course, this is a little bit sketchier in some situations to be just ripping out Spring Waters left, right, and center. There are a few minions hanging around in the deck, so it looks like he is tending to lead towards the Arcane Intellect here instead.
Yeah, I guess that 2 mana he wants to use afterwards is pretty reasonable. You can just go AI Ignite and then use the Spring Water when your mana is not quite so necessary, not quite so tight in terms of your removal options.
Time runs out on me.
Okay, it's still chugging along for pikahara. He really just needs to get down the Rakara on turn 7, and I think this game is very salvageable for him, because again, Matty's game plan is going well, right? But it's not going perfectly. He still hasn't played flow. I'd be very surprised if he kills his opponent before turn 8 at the earliest, and turn 9 more reasonably, I think, with the way this game is plodding down.
Wow, card draw just finds more card draw. But as you were saying, still no flow, and also still just no Mizaki in the hand.
True.
Which is very often the limiting factor. If that Mizaki is bottom 3, bottom 4 cards at this point, then it might be even slower than what you are projecting that Matty is able to get this kill through. And he's not going to have many more turns where he's able to keep super clean control over the board. He does have that 1 fire sale locked up, but the size of minions does escalate very, very quickly from this point.
I like this as well from Matty, because I imagine he's going to end with the flurry here, or at the very least not damage the minion, because it's pretty unlikely that they will actually be able to proc this pirate, which makes it that little bit less likely that they'll be able to play Rakara on turn 7, because even if they don't draw the really bad cards in Shiver and Man the Cannons, even if they're drawing Mr. Smite, it's too expensive, or another Anchorman. They can't then play 2 pirates on the same turn. So there were a few draws for pikahara that left him without quest reward on turn 7. Does hit it though, Rakara and the Juggernaut coming down next turn. So the pressure is on for Matty. He needs to be setting up for that turn 9 kill, I'm thinking.
Yeah, because crucially with Mage, they don't have any ability to just resist the double boom every turn. You are going to be taking that damage to face every single turn, more or less, once Juggernaut comes online. So you lose health very, very quickly. If you start throwing cannoneers and weapons into that equation as well, which of course the weapons will be guaranteed at that point, then you are going to be in serious trouble. 24 health, which Matty has, can melt away incredibly quickly once Captain Rakara hits the board.
All right, now we're talking the Flow and the Mizaki, both the cards we were talking about that have been missing, found now for Matty. So how greedy can we be on this turn? If he goes Flow plus, I don't know, Brain Freeze plus Flurry, or just Flow plus Brain Freeze, with that way he's taking little damage on the turn, maybe sets up lethal, but more likely you go for one more utility turn, and then you go for the combo once you found the second biscuit as well.
Yeah, I like this. So you can Brain Freeze the 3/3 just straight up off the board. That way you remove the loss condition, essentially, of the Flurry hitting the 2 outside minions. Then you'd have to Brain Freeze the middle Ron Burgundy and actually draw the card, which is not what you want to do in that situation. And then from here, you can try and take this one turn to ambitiously hope to be able to take down most of this board. You do have Fire Sale, you do have a First Flame in hand.
Yeah.
Maybe if you can find something off the top to support that, that can go fairly well, and then look to set up a potential lethal on turn 9. but the Lilu Dallas multicaster has now been found off the top, and that changes everything. That is a ton of card draw now at this point for Matty, all discounted from that flow that he squeezed in on the previous turn.
Okay, all good cards, essentially guaranteeing himself lethal without even needing to get too fancy with multiple ignites shuffled in and then played again in a single turn. So it's just about how does he make it as least likely as possible for pikahara to be able to get lethal. Like Gorehowl and Mr. Smite coming off the Juggernaut, yeah, okay, maybe you're just dead in that instance anyway. But he wants to make it as few outcomes as possible that are going to be able to get there. And so, as you said, Fire Sale seems like a reasonable way to go about it. But I think if you were going to do that, you'd start with the Hot Streak, sorry. So he does end up with the trade here instead.
Yeah, looking, I think, just to trade that into another removal spell and then be a little bit more effective with the Flurry. Doesn't get it, because again, I imagine if he's looking for the clean lethal setup next turn, unless you count your out very, very specifically, your brain will tell you to hold on to that Hot Streak for your Mazaki kill on the following turn to be able to line things up. That's a Bulwark of Hazalot! Oh no! Utter disaster for Matty.
Is that better than Gorehowl? Like, I don't even know if Gorehowl gave him lethal here, whereas this just guarantees him an extra turn. Or, I should say, at least makes it much, much more difficult for Matty to get the kill.
How much is this? So that's 13 going through. So he would have a 7 attack weapon swing. So yeah, Gorehowl would not have even been lethal with the fight in that scenario. So Bulwark was absolutely the nuttiest card to go. What? Hang on a second.
Swinging?
Hang on a second. I know we like to talk about pushing the one, but that seems ambitious.
That is very brave. I think you're just cowering down behind your big spiky plank here.
Hey, how did you know my nickname at school?
There's no way. There's no way. Come on.
Really wants to. Oh, he's doing it. The absolute mad lad. Pushing the one with the Bulwark, which means Matty now has one spell that he needs to connect with. Is there ever a world?
This would be the ultimate redemption for any misplays that may have happened in the previous Masters Tour. If he can pull this off, I will be absolutely stunned.
I will crush your delusions of grandeur.
Valarian coming down. Low damage ignite may as well. He's going to clear.
Is he clearing?
Oh!
Wow.
All right, 6 damage ignite, 7 damage ignite. I'm on board. All right, so I mean, it's a ton of clearing power, to be fair. Yeah, and he's actually got a good base of minions on the board as well with a 3/8, right, to be able to tank some of the cannon damage on the previous turn. On the following turn, sorry.
Runs out on me.
Draw to fatigue. Oh, he's drawing too much. I think he went a little bit too far. He's going to start taking so much fatigue.
Yeah.
I guess you can shuffle back the ignites and that delays it for a little while.
Yep.
Okay, okay.
As long as he has a hot streak to do it, which he does, yep, that's absolutely fine. Get that back into the deck, resist fatigue for at least one turn here, make sure it's not too big of a deal.
That was a Hearthstone turn. Fair play to you, Matty.
Yeah, I love it. Even squeezed the biscuit in at the last second. So now this Mazaki has to be killed by pikahara here to be able to have a realistic chance of taking this one down. Does hit it. He's just won.
It can't clear the Mazaki. Can't kill Matty. Can Matty necessarily guarantee the kill with the tradables? He can, right? Because you obviously can't play Cram Session, but I think it just gets there.
It does depend on exactly what the spell damage is at this position, but there's still plenty of other spells in his hand that he can cast to juice this up without drawing cards, right? Like, he doesn't have to cast the Cram Session here to juice it significantly. Does it do 41?
It has to, right? Come on. He can play like 3 of them, 4 of them, I think, on this turn with the... It just has to. And even if it doesn't, he can maybe survive another turn even with the ice barrier stopping the weapon hit.
Oh, the first one does 18! Derek, forget about it! Oh my goodness, that's so much damage!
That is infinity damage.
It is infinity damage, yeah. I think Matty's just going to be as careful as possible here, trying to juice this as much as he can. Yeah, Brain Freeze can be dumped out first.
Yeah.
He can spend some mana on Ice Barrier and then juice it back up with the Mana Biscuit, for example, if he really, really wants to. But whichever way he sees to do this, Ignite and a couple of tradables will be able to get 2 Ignites back out of his deck. And that, Matty, is more like it. That's the kind of performance befitting the amount of hype that we've given him over the last couple of these Masters Tours. That is a very, very nicely navigated game of Mazaki Mage. The Bulwark made his life difficult. He spotted it. We were trying to find ways to break through the Bulwark of Azzinoth like absolute noobs. Matty knew what the deal was. Throw all his removal that we talked about at the start of the game at those minions. Of course, Brain Freeze, First Flame, they become incredibly effective removal spells on those Mazaki turns. Beautifully navigated by Matty in the end. Very, very nicely done indeed.
I mean, we're talking about the clever plays from Matty. We're not talking about the genius weapon swing from pikahara to try and bait his opponent into breaking through the Bulwark. He knew that the clear was there. He was trying to make him go for the clear. It's like Gabby bringing a deliberately terrible version of Garrote Rogue to the Invitational to try and make his opponents not ban it, as can be the only explanation for that monstrosity with a full Reno deck. But yeah, obviously, jokes aside, fantastically done by Matty to be able to get that first win. The Mage ticked off for this battle, which means now moving on to the rest of his combo-oriented lineup. The Warlock's banned out of the way, and so it's going to be the Weapon Rogue as opposed to the Garrote Rogue, and the classic OTK Demon Hunter. And if I had to guess, like you said, the Demon Hunter feels like a classic anti-aggro combo deck. So much heal, so much removal, and usually is just very happily able to sail through to its Il'gynoth win condition at the end. But Weapon Rogue traditionally has been very weak to these hyper-aggressive strategies, or even just very board-dense strategies, because if we look at this deck of cards, Prize Plunder is pretty much the only removal piece you have in the deck, so it can be very susceptible to the likes of Pirate Warrior or Aggro Druid for Pikahara.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this, if there is going to be a deck, that is going to be problematic against some of these more board-based strategies from Pikahara on the other side, this will be the one. This is not really a deck where you can switch to a clearing strategy, as we just saw there, expertly done from Matty at the end. When you get down to it, if you don't have lethal, you do have to lean very, very heavily into those Cloak of Shadows to be able to find you those extra turns that you need. But even then, against Pirate Warrior, they have ways to counteract that if they set it up intelligently. So I think this would be a tough one. I think this is probably the crux of the series. It's not quite as clear as it is in some Conquest series, like what the real targeted deck, what the weak link deck is in the series, but certainly for Matty, I would, or for Pikahara, I would pin a lot of hopes on picking up multiple wins against this Weapon Rogue.
Agreed, and I feel like he's got the best for first here with the Aggro Druid against the Weapon Rogue. It's everything that Weapon Rogue does not want to see. It's plenty of minions that are tough to clear. It's Cult Neophyte as a one-off to disrupt those mid-game pushes where it wants to play a bunch of poisons and cutting class. And then taunts. Taunts are just an absolute nightmare. It seems so pedestrian almost at this point in Hearthstone's life cycle. But yes, taunts will stop your opponent from punching you in the face. And so Teacher's Pet, Greybow, Annoyatron in particular is just so blooming annoying against this Weapon Rogue. And so I do think for Pikahara, like you said, this is a crucial win if he wants to have any chance in the series whatsoever. And this seems like a good list as any to get there. He's not running the Jerry-Rig Carpenter, which we saw crop up here and there with Sow the Soil in the Aggro Druid. Yeah. Are you a bigger favorite of one list or the other? Do you think this is a fine way to go?
I have been marginally impressed with the Jerry-Rig Carpenter, but not blown away with it in the list. It does, you know, it feels like the card itself, yes, I think if you just read the text on that, you're like, okay, that does powerful things that I'm interested in. But then when you actually start to dig into the cards that you have to get in there as well to support it, you start to feel a little bit more underwhelmed. You know, this isn't Wild. You don't just get to win the game immediately thanks to a rather irritating bug with Jerry-Rig Carpenter. So I don't mind taking it out. I think jury is still certainly out on this one, but yeah, taunts, as you mentioned, are the biggest deal overall, which I think is a interesting dynamic shift in the way that Mr. Smite has affected the meta. I think it's introduced a few different combo strategies, and with, you know, Quest Mage being nerfed, for example, and we are seeing a few more of the combo decks going more into old school Leroy style charge damage and weapon damage, which is something that can be interacted with a lot more favorably by just playing taunts, right? Where it kind of removes that feeling of, oh, I couldn't do anything about that. For example, that last Mizaki game, even though it was beautifully played from Matty, it was all burn damage from hand that the other player can then feel like, well, what really could I have done about that? Whereas when your damage is coming from weapons and charge minions, you do have the ability to just go all the way back to 2014, and keyword taunt actually starts becoming very, very effective.
Interesting mulligan there for Matty, with a hand that in Garrote Rogue would be seen as pretty close to the absolute nuts, with a caveat of why is Deadly Poison in my deck. But in this matchup, when you are so reliant on weapon, he does end up throwing away the Shroud of Concealment, to draw some extra minions. Are you in agreement with this game plan? You think it's fine to toss away some powerful card draw?
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, just this a very, very different deck, as you mentioned, from Garrote Rogue. Your plan hinges on different things. I think in particular in this matchup, those prize plunderers are huge. And then obviously in every matchup, you really do need to start getting that big weapon and the card draw going as fast as possible. But the card draw really more dependent on the weapon, right? You want to be playing Silverleaf Poisons and cutting class rather than just allocating straight up mana on drawing cards more often than not, when you essentially get to draw some cards for 0 by mulliganing them away in your opening hand.
For no one.
Well, this is an annoying start for pikahara, not the kind of situation you want to be in, where on turn 2 you're losing board against Weapon Rogue. And so in the end, he's ending up with, whoa, what is this, hero power on turn 2? This has to be the nightmare for an aggro druid, and what I was saying was a must-win matchup.
Double Swindle now. Discounted for Matty, can be comboed with that Bloodsail Raider. Silverleaf Poison also picked up as more card draw. 0 mana Secret Passage means that he can go digging for a weapon with that on 3 mana if he'd like to do so, and if he doesn't find a weapon off this, off any of his other card draw, which obviously he can't do off this Swindle with just a spell and a minion specifically. Thank you.
Ooh, okay. It's a weird hand for pikahara, right? Because this is really what I see as the redeeming factor for aggro druid. It's a deck that I first saw as, you know, one of those classic board-based arena-style decks where if they stay ahead, they're incredibly powerful and they're probably going to win the game. But as soon as they fall behind, the game just ends. It's not necessarily the case with aggro druid. You have some of these comeback mechanisms with the raw power of Arbor Up, even if there's just one minion in play. Burst card draw with playing a couple minions and then composting. I could theoretically see this coming back for pikahara now, but with the power of these draws turn after turn for Matty, it's going to have to be some real powerhouse plays from the druid.
Derek, he's just winning board with his 3 minion deck. Like, how is this happening? Some sort of Penflinger Swindle combination this turn. Penflinging the 2/1 and ideally the Divine Shield here, I would imagine, to get through.
I guess. I was wondering if you ever still just go for Secret Passage, but if you miss the Shank or the Sword, it's so much worse. So yes, I am perfectly okay with this plan.
Oh, interesting. He's going to go prep poison instead, preserve the Penflinger in hand, and then just use the weapon swing to chew through the Annoyatron. Yeah, most of the lines I was looking at left the Penflinger on board. There was a way to do this with the Penflinger instead of the weapon charge, but since you're playing Silverleaf Poison, you might as well use the weapon instead. And then, as mentioned, you're back with that Penflinger chilling in hand alongside a Prize Plunderer, which means Matty probably has a very nice chance of clearing up the next board that comes down here as well. Really preventing composting, a setup for Arbor Up, all of that good stuff that you want to be doing at this point if you are Pikahara.
And so despite composting and Arbor Up both benefiting off minions on board, as I see it, they're kind of two different halves of this game plan that you have to pick one on this turn, because there's obviously the play of just going Druid of the Reef for Taunt, probably, Orc Merchant composting. You draw a couple cards, you're accepting that your board's going to get wiped most likely, or you can go Hero Power, Druid plus the Orc Merchant, clear the board, get a minion in play, and just pray that this can set up for an Arbor Up turn, which is incredibly all-in. If this gets cleared up now, he's left with a completely dead composting in hand. But if it can somehow survive, then maybe just the power of the buff can get there from all these, from the Arbor Up.
Shadow Step now as well, alongside that solitary Prize Plunderer. But he's no... I mean, this is the big question mark over this play from Pikahara, right? Because you say, hope that this is going to stick a board for Arbor Up or composting on the following turn. You know the 2-1's dying, right?
True.
Like, you can pretty much be guaranteed that even if Matty had no play in his hand whatsoever to bounce that Penflinger back, which is basically impossible with any given weapon rogue hand, he would still just Penflinger a 2-1 on that turn because he knows that the fear is composting an Arbor Up and things like that coming on the following turn. So at best, you're sticking one minion here going into the following turn, and it's not even really a criticism of the play that Pikahara made in this spot. It's just kind of a representation of how dire his spot is at the moment.
Yeah. It's a criticism of how badly he drew. Come on, Pika.
Yes.
Step it up. Is it just Octobot now? Like, it still doesn't technically die to Arbor Up, and you can have a beastly turn next turn.
I think he's willing to let the Arbor Up happen, right? Because for him, the information on Prize Plunderer is concealed, right? Pikahara knows nothing about that really going on. He knows that a minion has been drawn from the Swindles, but I'm not sure whether that, like, one of them was the Penflinger and one of them was the Prize Plunderer, I suppose, in that position. But the Shadow Step as well means that even if Arbor Up does come down here, Matty will probably feel relatively comfortable that he's able to clear this up.
This is so ridiculous because he hasn't drawn any weapons, which is usually a bad thing, but he hasn't drawn any poisons either, so he doesn't have any dead cards in hand. He's just playing Garrote Rogue here, effectively.
Yeah.
With having drawn all the same half of the deck, more or less.
The world's most scuffed tempo rogue is what he's currently playing at the moment. Shroud here to set up the Prize Plunderer for 3, and then Shadow Step coming through, I imagine. Where Matty's going.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say that maybe Matty here, the one thing he needs to be afraid of is that classic combo that we always talk about in Aggro Druid of Oracle into the Battle Guard into a 5-cost Taunt as well, because it's getting to that point where that could be enough pressure to push him out of the game, so he needs to start actually moving towards playing a weapon. I don't think as good as his board control game plan has been in the mid-game, it's not game-winning on its own. He still needs to start swinging with weapons to close this one out. And so while I think this has all been fine for Matty, next turn I do think is the time to actually just get the weapon with the passage and start properly trying to close this one out.
Yeah, and that means that Neophyte makes life a little bit awkward, as does finally the composting coming down. 3 cards being drawn here for Pikahara. Does have some nuts in the deck as well, so this could be a massive board out of nowhere. But Matty skips himself the secret passage, which actually is now double discounted from the Octobot. Sorry, my mistake. It would have actually still cost 0, even with the Cult Neophyte there.
And so Matty has a perfectly reasonable play on this turn if he wants to take it, of just playing the Shank and all his 1-drops on this turn to be able to clear the board, get the Shank played, set up for passage next turn to find some poisons. Do you think that it's too much of an expenditure of his win condition to play the Bloodsail Raider here just to get more board control?
Yeah, I wonder about it, certainly, because one's already gone, right? One Bloodsail Raider was already played in the early game, so in terms of charging pirates, he is quite limited from this point if Bloodsail Raider number 2 comes down, and I think he, with one cloak in hand, his mind might just be creeping towards exactly how many poisons he needs to pick up to just have a scam win condition with Smite, Raider, a bunch of poisons from the Secret Passage maybe next turn, that kind of thing.
Oh, it doesn't even want to give the card draw. This is an interesting alternate route I didn't really consider, which is technically weak to, what, exactly second Arbor up as the really big punish for leaving minions on board, but makes that refill that I was talking about with the Oracle Battle Guard plus Taunt that much less likely. Or just minions, right? It doesn't specifically have to be that. It's just efficiently spending your mana. And so for Matty, I actually kind of respect this line of just giving your opponent, hopefully, a deliberately weak turn.
Yeah, I think honestly he doesn't actually care that much how much pressure he's going to be under. Like,
right.
He's not really dealing with this board ever again, and I think he's resigned to that position. So limiting the card draw, for example, limits the ability to draw more taunts or Oracle of Elune or all of those things that can potentially just put like multiple Annoyatrons, multiple Teacher's Pets, multiple Pack Mules on board, which I think is far more limiting to his win condition at this point than, you know, just Arbor up hitting the board, which he can resist with Cloak of Shadows, and then hopefully the second Cloak of Shadows later on from his position as well.
Seems a little unsure as to how to approach the rest of this turn, because before he played the second Pen Flinger, I was thinking it could be a Secret Passage turn still. Now I'm thinking it feels a little bit low on mana. You can still play the Paralytic Poison or the Deadly Poison, I suppose. But instead just going with the swing of the weapon to draw off of the Silverleaf Poison feels a little bit more solid.
Okay, finds the other cloak. He's just going to use it now, it looks like. Okay. I'm on board. Once again, limiting the amount of card draws available to the opponent, but the opponent does keep drawing taunt minions, Pikahara, picking up taunt after taunt. It's not a great surprise. This is called Aggro Taunt Druid, so you are entitled to draw some taunts in this position.
If I call it Win Druid, then am I entitled to win every game? Is that just how it works?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, great.
You have to get the name through the official naming committee, though. You can't just call the deck Win Druid. It has to be ratified by the correct channels.
Okay, of course. Which is, of course, a rigorous process that ends up with the deck being called the wrong thing half the time as we scramble to fill in the tracker before our match starts.
Yes.
It's kind of a weird spot for Pikahara where I can see where his head is at in terms of keeping taunts back, just to constantly have a drip feed of taunts, so at all points in the game he can stop the weapon from swinging face. But there's not really such a thing as overextending versus Weapon Rogue. They have no AoE, they have no way to deal with multiple taunts at the same time. You could argue he's holding it back for Oracle of Elune, Arbor up maybe, but it does just mean it's less pressure overall in the immediacy.
Matty did hit the absolute business there with the Secret Passage, hitting 3 poisons. There were multiple weapons left in the deck as well at this point, which would have been entirely redundant in this position. But hitting the poisons, juicing up that attack, is giving him the best possible hope of being able to get through this. And he is now going to be able to cut this board down to a single taunt and get a weapon swing through to connect to face, which is a really, really big deal. And I think another reason why Pikahara is even thinking of holding on to this Bone Chewer Brawler on the previous turn, again, is that Oracle draw, right? That he can then potentially play 2 taunts in the same turn on the following turn. He can draw Oracle or he can draw another taunt, which means once again he gets 2 taunts into play and potentially is able to shut down those face attacks going through once again.
It's going to be razor thin, these margins, though. The Prize Plunderer kept all this time for Matty means that for a potential Mr. Smite plus Prize Plunderer Bloodsail combo, he can get a lot of damage with the Shadow Step on the Raider as well on this turn. And with that being essentially a dead draw for Pikahara, he has to play at least one taunt here, you'd imagine. It's really just whether or not he'll go all in before he finds that Oracle.
Yeah, 4 cards left. He knows there's one Shadow Step left. He knows there's one Prize Plunderer left. I imagine he'll feel forced to play both taunts just for matter of being alive this turn with the amount of damage that can come through. Already a huge weapon being represented on the other side. So I think he'll want to set up a situation where like the Prize Plunderer, the Shadow Step needs to be used on the Prize Plunderer, for example, to be able to get through the Bone Chewer Brawler on the other side. Can't be used for extra damage. I think if he plays one taunt here, it ends up just being way too flimsy almost all the time against his opponents.
For no one.
Yeah, just going all in, saying it's not going to get there in the future. I'm dead in a couple turns' time anyway. Let's hope that somehow they can't kill it. Maybe a top deck Arbor up. I don't know. It's getting slimmer and slimmer for Pikahara in what was just, from start to finish, a nightmare of a game. I respect how he approached it to try and give him some semblance of hope, but I mean, Matty very possibly just has lethal right here, right? With Prize Plunderer being able to get the battle cry and also just having charge as well, right, from Mr. Smite.
Yeah, so it's 28 if everything can connect face, so now he can Prize Plunderer one of the taunts out of the way. The problem is he can't use the Shadow Step before the other taunt is killed because he needs to get that through, but he can just trade the Prize Plunderer into the other taunt, use the Shadow Step, everything else goes through with charge, and yeah, that is going to be lethal for Matty. Very, very nicely done again. He was handed a winnable game, let's say. Like, there are certain pan-outs of that matchup which just wouldn't have been winnable from his position, but it was still a difficult game. There was nothing easy to navigate about what happened, and that's kind of the mark of a good player. We see this from Gabby all the time, for example. Like, part of Gabby's monstrous win rate is that he just doesn't throw, right? Like, you can kind of create this this perception that you're getting lucky in certain situations because you hang in there. Every game that is winnable, you do everything that you can to win it, and then that creates more scenarios where you can just get lucky because your opponents are throwing in spots that you're not. You just kind of get more dice rolls over the course of your Hearthstone career by being competitive for longer in spots, and I think that's exactly that kind of game from Matty, where even though that was a game where Pika clearly did not draw very well, Matty still did everything that he had to do to be able to navigate his way through it.
I think you're absolutely right, and the key part of that I think was so cleverly played by Matty was his allotting of his removal pieces, because we talk about how precise they are, how few and far between they are in the deck, but there were multiple opportunities in that game where he could have played Prize Plunderer or Penflinger or both to get a full clear on the board and just, you know, dust his hands and say, right, good job me, I've cleared the board, I'm doing the anti-aggro thing. But he quite cleverly recognized that it was much, much more important to deny the card draw and, most importantly, I think, save for one final push, clear off these taunts in the late game with the Prize Plunderer, and that's exactly what he did. It was just a beautiful demonstration of how to play the matchup and, like you say, capitalize on a bad draw from your opponent, which means that the one deck we were thinking that might really struggle for Matty in the Weapon Rogue is now ticked off alongside the Mage, and it's only the OTK Demon Hunter left over. Not necessarily the premier anti-aggro deck for Demon Hunter, but it's still pretty much synonymous with being powerful against aggro over the entirety of its lifespan.
Yeah, I think that's very fair. And just to add one final beat on the following game as well, because I don't want to heap all the praise particularly one-sided. I think Pikahara did a great job of recognizing the situation as well, because the mistake I would have made from Matty's side was using the Prize Plunderer too early, as you were saying. And he got so much more work done with the Penflinger than I was expecting him to be able to do. But I think Pikahara was also recognizing that dynamic the whole way through. Constantly, you could see that in his mind, he still has a Prize Plunderer and a Shadow Step left, right? So I need to ration out my board so that I'm always making it as awkward as possible for one prize plunderer to be able to dig through the amount of taunts that I have. He was always looking for those oracle outs. He was also trying to play multiple taunts per turn instead of just drip feeding them one taunt at a time. I think, again, with a bad hand, pikahara kind of did some pretty clever things in that matchup as well. Questionable maybe with the extremity that he took the slow playing to, like almost hard passing on some turns, but I think he at least had a coherent philosophy for the way to play the matchup that he stuck to very nicely. But moving on now, he's hit a much better hand this time around, I would say. Plenty of early aggression with those Bone Chewer Brawlers and the Guardian Org Merchant, and crucially, he's actually hit one of the good cards this game, Darek, where all 4 of them were buried in the bottom of the deck in the previous.
Yeah, I really like that he's going for Tempo Bone Chewer Brawler here. I mean, Tempo Bone Chewer Brawler is probably a bit of a meme, but playing it out without the Divine Shield initially is, I think, absolutely spot on, because it means that next turn he can still just go for Brawler number 2 plus the Orc Merchant. But also Cult Neophyte, I think, is very likely to be a really strong card into specifically turn 3 to try and deny that quest completion. And so just Neophyte plus the Orc Merchant should be a really strong play for pikahara next turn.
I think he's also drinking apple tea, which is making me very, very jealous. Just not everything that is available in this country. You go to Japan, like, it's everywhere. It's in every convenience store. It's in all the vending machines that are on the street corners. You can just get it all the time, and it's wonderful. Just can't get it in this country, and it makes me sad.
Is it different from, like, apple? Because you can get, like, herbal tea bags with
it's
apple
not,
in
yeah,
it.
No, it's not like apple flavored tea. It's almost like tea flavored apple, and it's not like an iced tea either. It's something different from both of those things, but it's very delicious.
Sounds good, because apple tea bags suck. They taste just enough like apple to tease you, but they're just not sweet at all. They taste like cardboard. It's not the one. So pikahara can take a risk here on Oracle of Elune, right? If it does stick, it's going to lead to a very, very powerful turn next turn. But do you want to leave yourself vulnerable to that when you could just take a guaranteed powerful turn with Neophyte and Orc Merchant?
I really like it. Full health on the Oracle of Elune is a big ask this turn. Even at worst, it probably interrupts a quest turn, right? Which is kind of worth its weight in gold on its own, particularly when you've just picked up the second one. You kind of have that redundancy with the Oracle. And if it lands, like, not only do you get to make the huge board next turn, but part of your turn is also Cult Neophyte, which is then protecting your huge board on the following turn. So I think this is a risk well worth taking in this situation.
Matty just goes with the glide, basically throwing all the cards up in the air and saying, let's just see what happens, because pikahara could walk out of this with a monstrously powerful turn. I'm obviously looking at Battle Guard as the premier card to get here in order to be able to double up, and he gets both Battle Guard and Greybow off the draw, which means he can double up on the Greybow on this turn, and the Squirrel as well to round out the curve.
Yes, but Darek, with no Neophyte being hit on the redraw, Matty hit discounted Guild Trader Immolation Aura on his 2 draws on the other side. So the crucial card that pikahara needed to find again was the Cult Neophyte in this situation.
That's pretty good for both players, but therefore more so Matty. I mean, you've just got to do it for pikahara, right? Like, they have 4 cards in hand. I mean, they're going to have 6 after the sigil goes off, but surely it's worth it to get 2 Greybows online.
Well, he doesn't anymore, right?
Oh, you don't now. Yeah. Okay.
I echo your skeptical noise, Darek.
Like, you can call it overextending, but it's that weird kind of overextension where, you know, yes, it's most of your resources used now, but if you save them for later, they become significantly worse because your Oracle's dead and then you only get 1 Battle Guard and 1 Greybow.
Right.
I don't know.
Are there other Hearthstone turns available this turn? I don't think there are, right? You can open the boxes first, I suppose.
Yeah, see what happens. I guess are there any cards? Because, I mean, you would like it... It's so close to clearing without needing the Guild Trader. He's just trying to think if there's any way he can get there without that. Like Death's Bite or Dreadlord's Bite, whatever it's called. Yeah,
no, you're right.
Very close to being able to do it. Or does pretty much do it.
Yeah, with the... You'd need then the swing just to clear up the Oracle at the end, right? But it would still work out very nicely.
I mean, whether or not that's better is another question, because then you have a Guild Trader in hand, which is okay, but you still need to trade it away to outcast the Spectral Sight. Either way, the upshot of it is that Matty does get himself the full board clear, the last thing that pikahara wanted to see, of course. And he's moving on quite happily with his game plan.
Yep, Immo goes down. Tuskpiercer's swing is now set up as well. Picks up a Kurtrus, which will be pretty promising over the coming turns as well. He can quite easily outcast that from the left-hand side, even if nothing kind comes out from the right-hand side of his deck to be able to set that up.
Look at that 2 health.
What a scrub.
Pathetic.
Bramble guards, hold the line!
I mean, you've committed now, pikahara. Let's be honest. You're playing the Grave up.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, sure, you can play both alongside it.
Bramble guards, hold the line!
I think this makes sense, right? If you niche things as plays around, particularly if you're maybe thinking Kurtrus as an option was taken from the other side, like I-Beam Kurtrus, for example, you've now...
Can he complete the quest as well? Oh no, it's 1 mana off. Okay.
Mm-hmm. We'll just have to make do with this, I suppose.
Oh man, I feel for pikahara this series. Like, I think there were a couple of things I disagreed on. Obviously, this game with the Greybout, I do think I would have played that differently. But he's just getting dumpstered here. Like, Matty is playing fantastically. But he's drawing some real nice hands as well.
Again, not like the Greybow decision really mattered that much, right? Like 6 AoE is 6 AoE, because coming back the other way, so...
It's just the classic response of, if you made a single misplay over the entirety of a series of Hearthstone, you are not allowed to complain. That's just how...
Yeah, true. All I see, honestly, when I check Twitter is people ascribing religiously to that mantra.
And now you just do things, right, for Matty? Oh, acrobatics as well. Probably want to see Tuskpiercer first so that you can draw again with the Tuskpiercer next turn. It's generally the way you do it in Demon Hunter when you have 2 of them in hand, or 1 in play, 1 in hand. And then from there, it's unbelievably specific hands for pikahara that I think even have a chance here.
Yeah, I mean, the big saving grace, I suppose, at this point is that both Immolation Auras are gone, because those are the big power cards for Matty in this position. He now really only has 1 Fellscream Blast expendable as an actual AoE effect in this position, unless you want to find some incredibly scrappy win condition with a I-Beam or a Magtheridon board further down the line. But Matty is just, the world is pretty much his oyster this turn, because he already has the board checked just with the natural weapon swing, so he can just choose to do whatever else he likes this turn, which in terms of OTK Demon Hunter means draw cards, then draw some more cards.
I think I'm okay with starting or going Acro here as opposed to Peddler, because this over completes the quest by 1, which means that he is then discounting an extra card. It's generally worth it at this stage in the game. And then, yeah, as we see here, Spectral Sight, Acrobatics, Kurtrus guaranteed to be able to go into hand next turn.
Oh, no nuts, no composting this game. Like, he doubled up on nuts, right, off the Oracle turn, but fine. Darek, please. Finding those off the top this turn would have been huge because, again, AoE is the limiting factor. 2 or 3 3-health minions coming down this turn is not going to be particularly worrying for Matty because he can just I-beam one thing. The rest of the board isn't going to be too worrying compared to what he can output on the other side. But if he was actually able to get a big board of squirrels coming down, then that might have been a different story.
Yep, 5 squirrels here, and then we're talking. But like you say, no such luck. Pikahara without even that luxury to be able to boast here. So I think, again, probably, I guess you have to be reasonable and go Taunt if you're going to play the Druid of the Reef. But Loki, I just want to go attack form, Arbor up, and hope that somehow cheeses a win.
Oh, again! The hard pass! The Pikahara special! He believes, he's waiting for the juice. This is kind of a skill set that you do have to develop in aggro druid, is knowing when to do nothing and just hoping for one of those big top decks. But so many of the power cards are even just gone for Pikahara at this point that I'm not sure what he's necessarily playing towards in this position.
Oh, but he can actually just get Kurtrus and play it on this turn, right? One more trade, I think, just gets it there. And then next turn, Acrobatics. He's only a Fell Screen Blast away from Magtheridon clear as well.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you thought he'd overdrawn? No.
No, I was just saying because he drew the Fell Screen Blast as you were saying he's only one.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed.
So I imagine Squirrels off the top was the hope, right? That's what he was willing to wait one more turn for in that position. Because as I mentioned, so many of the Battle Guards and Oracles have gone in this position. In fact, I think all 4, right? Double Oracle, double Battle Guard has already been played this game. So his ability to pop off hard with some big combo turn is very limited. But he does have that big stack of nuts in the deck from that earlier Oracle turn, but just has not hit any of them so far this game.
He still has 1 Oracle in the deck because the second one got shuffled back in.
That's right. Yeah.
But more or less, it does not matter at this point. It's still just looking very troubling. And here it is, the final push, the last wave of defense for Pikahara against Matty's just incredible play so far this season. He can walk away a very happy victor if this goes the way we are currently expecting it to. Because if no other inspiration takes Matty, he can just go trade Magtheridon Arcanist plus Fellscreen Blast to get himself a 12-12 and obliterate the board in the meanwhile. But I think you, I, and he all know there has to be something even better here.
Yeah, there's a little bit of mana to flirt with before you have to commit to that line as well, which, when you have the potential of drawing Moargs and more spell damage from the remainder of your deck is always an appealing prospect. Looks like he is going to commit.
Sure. It will win you the game. That's good enough for most players.
Back up to 24, dropping the Sigil now. Still has plenty of juice left remaining to be able to get a quick lethal with this 12-12 supporting. I think the microscopic out here is squirrel into squirrel, squirrel into squirrel, into no lethal from Matty on the opposite side, and then maybe you get there over the course of 2 turns, but composting is basically the exact opposite of all of those things I just said.
They will never catch me.
And so again, here for Matty, like, whether you want to go for drawing Glide into discounting Il'gynoth, go for the lethal combo, you could also just play all your cards and you're also going to win the game that way. It's just a case of not somehow fatiguing yourself for 80 damage, and I think you're fine.
If there was... All he needs is a way to get the other I-Beam outcast without spending more mana, and he would have just had it right. Yeah, okay, fair enough, whatever. Let's stop thinking about it. But I think just with spell damage Moarg, with 2 I-Beams that would be dealing 10 apiece at that point with the Il'gynoth coming down, and enough targets to hit them with, because he had a 12-12 on board that he could shoot them with. All he had to do really was navigate I-Beam into outcast, which was trickier than I'm making it sound in that position. But yes, I think from Pikahara in that spot, the correct correct decision was reached, and that is a swift concede matched by an equally swift 3-0 victory from Matty. Took a little while to get started because of some technical difficulties at the start of the broadcast, but Matty made up for lost time, and we appreciate you for that. Got us right back on schedule. Thank you very much.
Yeah, just flawless playthrough. I really, really liked what I saw there from Matty. Obviously, the mage was a highlight in terms of how flashy it looked, going for the full board clear into sticking Mozaki for a turn, something that never, ever happens. It's one of those minions that just always dies the turns it comes down. But for me, even though it was less flashy, the rogue game, I think, was just so gorgeously piloted. It was such a good understanding of the matchup to be able to save your resources for exactly when they are needed. And that means that Matty is now moving up to 5-0 in the Swiss, further bolstering that already almost unrivaled win percentage in Masters Tours, and making him yet further a key contender for Europe Grand Masters next season, which is just absolutely stunning given how, again, year after year, season after season, the Europe point standings are incredibly difficult to meet, but Matty may just be able to get there if he can get 1 or 2 more wins.
Yeah, it's staggering when we talk about Matty having 70% plus win rate, and now that even increasing as well, how he's not just leading the Europe point standing already at this point. But, you know, it's the nature of competition. This will always be the case. Some wins mean more than others, particularly in tournament formats and knockout formats. And that has been the case for Matty, is that he has a very consistent average win rate, but he just hasn't won the right matches at the right time to really put those points on the board. So I hope for his sake, and I hope for my sakes, I think he'll be a fantastic addition to the program next year, that he is able to put a big run together. But I think we have plenty more action yet to come, so looking forward to seeing how things pan out over the rest of the day.
As am I. We could be seeing him in the top 16 tomorrow, or even later on in the day if he just continues winning out. But for now, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more action from round 5 here at Masters Tour Undercity.
Welcome back, everybody, to Masters Tour Undercity, and it is the middle of round 5. And I know that my co-host in this particular round is getting quite excited about this tournament because APAC, led by 5-0 Glory, are in with a chance of actually doing well in this tournament, Gia.
This could be the one, Lorinda, an APAC winner. I'm not even cursed anymore. I actually predicted something right at HGI, so I don't think I'll be jinxing anyone by saying this, hopefully. But for now, no APAC players involved as we cover some more round 5 action, this time between Dasuap and levik.
Yeah, I don't know much about Dasuap, and I'm sorry for that, but levik is a player who just plays every Hearthstone tournament and does pretty well in them in general. No major hits, no major results to speak of particularly, but good results, solid results, right the way from Community Cups all the way up to long-standing Masters Tours and Battle Rift and those sort of tournaments for many, many years. Well, it feels like many years. It's so many tournaments that you scroll down to sort of 2019 and you just give up because he just plays in every single thing.
Yeah, he is a name that I am quite familiar with because he's just had so many appearances in the Masters Tours as well. But on the other hand, Dasuap is a relatively new name. I'm not sure if it's his first Masters Tour or not, but we do have like a handful of competitors for which Undercity, the last Masters Tour of the year, is their first ever appearance. So we'll see if Dasuap counts himself among them. So far, bringing the aggro Taunt Druid, which is a deck we just saw kind of flop, honestly, for Pikahara a while ago. We see a lot of players experimenting with different sorts of Druid instead, maybe a bit greedier, which is exactly what levik is running on the other side. He's got the Malagos version, but no Mr. Smite in there, so we're seeing the full spectrum of Druids in this matchup.
Do you feel that it's underperforming slightly because of the nerf, or is it, I mean, to me, I'm always careful not to fall into the trap of, oh, it's just -1 health, that doesn't do any difference, but there doesn't seem to be many things that do exactly 2 damage in this meta, so to me it's a little bit weird. Do you think it is a big difference and I'm just missing out on this?
For most matchups, I would agree with you. The breakpoint is usually 3 to be aware of. Things like Brain Freeze, Quick Shot from Hunter, and even Drain Soul from Warlock. But there is a very key card from the Warrior, the Foxtail Freebooter, that does 2, and basically all the procs of the quest dealing 2 damage. I think that can make a big difference in Aggro Druid's power level, depending on whether or not you're going to ban that. But as it happens, both our players have banned away each other's face hunters, looking to get ahead on board and maybe not be so threatened by the likes of Hunter, which can curve out pretty consistently and now have more powerful buff effects. But levik's going to start off with his Jombre Druid in here, which is the best name we have for it because I thought nobody other than Jombre would be bringing the deck, but levik clearly understands its power level as well. It is not running Celestial Alignment or Anaconda, but it does have Glowfly Swarm, and it also just has a lot of spell synergy, trying to make use of that Gidra, the Umbral Owls, and eventually get to the Malagos and win off the board.
Yeah, I think at this point we have established that even if Jombre has never played the deck or touched the deck or had anything to do with the deck, if there's an Umbral Owl in the deck, then it's Jombre Druid. Simple as that. That's the short version of it. We have had multiple instances of the stats guy, whoever that is, calling things Jombre Druid when he hasn't even played the deck. But that's just how I roll sometimes. And so, see how it can proceed with this opener. All 3 cards you want, but is there much more you want even more than these?
Well, definitely some card draw I'd be looking at to juice up the Glowfly Swarm, but I'd love to see levik keep the Swarm, which he does. Over on Dasuap's side, I'm pretty surprised to actually see the Squirrel tossed away, but I guess off the play when you're going second, it does feel a lot less powerful, and perhaps you would be looking to curve coin 2 into 2, ideally with a Razormane Battle Guard in the mix somewhere, especially since Dasuap's running up against a deck that does play Glowfly, right? So if you wait too long to get on board as the aggro druid, you can get punished by too many minions coming back the other way. So Dasuap dreaming a bit bigger with this mulligan and gets, I want to say, somewhat rewarded, because Peasant is in some ways more threatening than the Squirrel on turn 1, but it's not quite the 2 into 2 curve that would be ideal.
Yeah, and he doesn't know it yet, but he is going to need to go fast here, because look at this starting hand from levik. He's going to get the Fungal Fortunes off into a potential either 4 or 5 Glowfly Swarm, depending exactly what picks up for that Fungal Fortunes, and that's going to be really irritating to deal with.
Indeed, Dasuap does get the first very threatening minion on the board though, the Oracle of Elune. able to copy, well, from Levik's perspective, a 2-drop, which would be very, very scary, especially if it's the Battle Guard. But Dasuap, we can see he doesn't actually have much to do with that other than the Guardian Og Merchant. But Levik doesn't really have a way of clearing the Oracle, so he is just trying to search for one. In fact, he respects it so much that he didn't go for the insta-fungal, instead going digging with the Moonlit Guidance for his Lunar Eclipse. Doesn't find it though, so probably gonna just take Lightning Bloom from this resizing pouch.
That would allow for a mega turn after the Fungal Forges. If you wanted to just go sort of all in for tempo for a turn, obviously you do get that overload, but on 4 mana that would be fine. On 6 mana turning into 4, that would still be fine the turn after.
Picks up the pouch again because of the effect of Moonlit Guidance, and it looks like he's going to bait it out here. I'm not quite sure though. I mean, if he respects the Oracle of Elune that much, then this is a play to find another Lightning Bloom and then use Bloom to go for Moonlit Guidance and then manage to find the Lunar Eclipse and hit a hero power. But okay, there's another option, the Umbral Owl. I forgot about that. That is a much cleaner way of getting rid of the Oracle. And it's a big deal that Levik found that after all the digging, because if he had missed, not only was he going to be threatened by that 2-4, he had much less juice for the Glowfly Swarm coming up later.
Yeah, it was an interesting line because it cuts out the Fungal for next turn as well. So these 2 Owls are going to have to get it done, at least for a couple of turns. And like you say, the Glowfly Swarm is going to be not useless, but significantly slower, significantly more difficult to set up now. It'll be very interesting to see how this works out, because it's a very different line to, I think, the ones we were both looking at.
Even Glowfly for 3 to 4 minions from this position for Levik is pretty great though, because of the fact that the Oracle of Elune was removed so easily. Well, sorry. It took a lot of work, but after it got... Wait, Dasuap also just missed the attack with the Malfurion, and he seems a bit tilted here. 3 damage to face, maybe not the end-all be-all of the matchup. It's more about the board, but you don't want to see these types of sloppy mistakes for sure.
Yep, and not messing around here for Levik, just not needing the Fungal Fortunes. Who needs 7 Glowflies? 4 is absolutely fine, as you just described, and the curve seems to be fixing itself pretty nicely now.
It has a chance to find an Arbor up, perhaps, and that would probably end the game on the spot. Doesn't quite hit it, but Fungal still very good here. Any type of effect that could help him clear up the Teacher's Pet would solidify Levik's lead almost to a situation where Dasuap cannot come back. In the end, just going for more tokens here, and I think, yeah, I love the not trading here. I think Dasuap would be happy if Levik sank 3 of these 2/2s into the Teacher's Pet and just gave the Death Rattle here. It's kind of like giving the Teacher's Pet Wind Fury in a way if you do the trades for him. So Levik now, by representing more minions on board, continues to represent an even more threatening Arbor up. But as it happens, it's Dasuap with the one with that big buff card here, and he can go for it with Adorable Infestation if he likes. I think it's the best way of fighting back on board, but he's gonna see what's in the studies first. The Pounds, pretty useful here.
Yeah.
Gets rid of another 2/2. Yeah.
His problem, of course, is he doesn't know there is no Arbor up on the other side, so I think we'll see him extensively, whatever he does, and I think that's what he's going to do. He's going to extensively play around the opposing Arbor up. The Levik halfway through the deck already. You just kind of expect it to be there, especially the way that the game has proceeded so far.
So Dasuap, I think, debating between Adorable or Peasant into Arbor up. Both of them would represent an additional minion on board, but of course the Adorable gives his Teacher's Pet a little bit more resiliency. He says he doesn't want the breakpoint, he wants the card draw, fair enough, and fits in the Pounds, like what we were talking about, to get rid of another 2/2 at the end of all of that. Trades as well, much respect given, and there's the Arbor up alongside the Solar Eclipse. All of these 2/2s are going up to 6 attack.
Yeah, absolutely crucial that he made the horrible-looking trade. Not as in he played it badly, but in terms of just, it makes you wince, right, to watch a 6/6 hit into a 2/2 where there's still 4 more 2/2s there. But absolutely going to get... I don't know if he's going to get rewarded. He may still lose, but at least going to get the most out of it that he possibly can.
So Dasuap not going for the Adorable is, you know, fine if he expects Solar Arbor, the breakpoint doesn't change. But actually, if it was just Arbor up, having the 5 health on his teacher's pet could have made quite a big difference. As it happens, though, it was the double, and Dasuap's in a world of trouble either way. He can go for at least a decent composting, but Levik's at a point where he doesn't even really need to trade, right? He's seen Arbor up, he's seen the entire hand. He could just send all of these remaining Treants face and threaten a 2-turn lethal while he sets up an 8-drop from the Cenarian Ward as well.
He may also be able to get something from the pouch that is just lethal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you Lightning Bloom, you go up to 10, and then you can pouch for Alexstrasza, I guess. But now there's going to be an Annoyatron. If Dasuap wants to go for it, he might also just hero power down the 6-1, which does eke a little bit more value out of a hand that is completely run dry, so I respect the line.
Yeah, I think it's
you know,
absolutely essential to do that, yeah.
Alex Lethal? Is he a gamer?
Come on.
I mean, even if you miss, you just go for the Cenarian Ward. I want to do it for the style points, but... Bloom
Go
pouch,
for it, Gia!
Miss, but it's fine. Fizzy wins, Cenarian Ward wins.
Yeah, Fizzy's just game over. And a nice spot there by Gia and by Levik to tidy this one out.
He trades? Really? I would be sending these face every single time of day, but okay, he trades 1. Fine.
Yeah, he's like, kill my 10-9 or you die. Don't kill the other 2 things, you die. Everything adds up to 10 quite nicely, so it does make sense.
Well, Dasuap can create a very annoying wall of taunts here. He can go Oracle of Elune, 4 Annoyatrons, and 2 Druid of the Reaps if he wants. It's the best way of staying alive.
Reflect in the moonwell.
Yeah? If you're alive, you're still going. If you're dead, you're not. So yeah.
Okay, gonna go for the rush version instead to get rid of the Fizzy. Makes sense here. Hello, 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 hello. And now Levik has not a huge problem. It's not a lot of damage on the other side, but he is worried about that last remaining copy of Arbor up that Dasuap could maybe top deck from this point. So gonna go digging for more removal options or a taunt of his own. Going for Lunars, and I guess a hero power could also be slotted in here.
Yeah, it does have that backup of the Cenarian Ward. Now draws the Solar Eclipse, so next turn that Cenarian Ward is going to be a huge deal if he wants to use that.
Pretty unlucky to miss the guess there. Nature said he's one of the few remaining cards that cost less than 2, but it's fine. Levik's still in a very healthy position, but this is where Aggro Druid can maybe pull it back. You know, the Grey Bow into a timely top deck like Park Panther is pretty good here. Like, the Panther has to die this turn to actually get the 3 damage, but seems worth it to me.
Yep. Full clear, and then you've got a bit of a wobbly board, but you're against nothing, so you just take your chance. Trying to look for other lines. I think he's looking for lines that preserve the Panther.
There is a world where you just drop Greybow Panther, trade a Divine Shield into the 4-1, and send the other Annoyatron's face. I think that's pretty decent as well. Maybe that even helps him set up a 2-turn lethal by virtue of the 2 remaining taunts and the Greybow protecting the Panther. But the thing is, just 6-3 going into Greybow loses Dasuap a lot of like damage potential for the next turn. So I think I would end up clearing the 6-3 here and then pushing the 3 damage face. But he disagrees. And now it's just nature into Solar Cenarian here for Levik.
I embarked just to get some extra numbers on the board.
We do like numbers here in Hearthstone.
Just in case it's double Natalie or something.
You would know.
I would. I absolutely would, Gia. Don't start me off. It would be a very long broadcast and a very boring one to hear me just talk about how often I get that card.
He's good in Mercs, at least. Learned.
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
So, can anything be done if he top decks Arbor up here? That seems like the only draw that could maybe get Dasuap out of this. Teacher's Pet is above average, but still doesn't quite feel like enough. But maybe there's a world he can milk a lot of Grey Bow value, like you trade in a Grey Bow, and hopefully the Death Rattle goes into the non-shielded Annoyatron. You can bounce that as well, or it goes on the Park Panther. But because you want to bounce the Grey Bow value, I think he starts the turn without playing Teacher's Pet just yet.
Yeah, it needs to see where that first attack goes and then work out from there. Is there a value play anywhere here? I don't think so, but just leave the 8-8 there and let the Annoyatrons do their job.
Well, I was thinking the Grey Bow can go in the 8-8 so it actually dies, and maybe you can get multiple Grey Bows this turn, but it doesn't solve the problem of you're not actually also clearing the 5-7 at the end of all that, and the Death Rattle goes on the Divine Shield one, which is very unfortunate indeed. Probably just have to bite the bullet here, trade the Park Panther, and play down the Teacher's Pet. And I actually think he has to face tank the 5-7 while he has this 3 damage plus hero power up front, because levik doesn't really have burst that can go through taunts, right? So as long as he's behind these taunts, the 6 health is still able to maybe pull back the game, but not with a top deck like that.
Yep. Gets a sensible roll, and now it's looking like levik, who looked like he'd closed it out very early on with that, getting the 9 drop for Alex attempted lethal. Looked like that was enough anyway. Just got a bit wobbly, showing once again, I mean, he is on 51, but showing once again how this aggro taunt druid can just hang around when you don't think it can. Composting at any point might have been really awkward here.
Indeed. Well, it's still a bit annoying for levik because the Teacher's Pet could spawn a poison, and this Divine Shield Annoyatron is hiding a Grey Bow behind it, but not a big deal in the grand scheme of things. Even if he pops the shield here, which then allows Dasuap to immediately get the Grey Bow back, the Grey Bow is not able to attack and get through the 8-8, so for levik, I think it's fine to just pop the shield here, make sure you can push the 6 the next turn, and move on to game 3.
Yep, but I'm quite happy to look at the picture of the cat and one of the best pieces of artwork in golden cards in all of Hearthstone for as long as we get here.
Indeed. I forget the name of the card, but it's a priest card. It's the one that Chalky teased as a 3-mana 3/4 in the mini set. He wasn't lying.
Imagine knowing what any of the cards are called. I'd be completely and utterly giving away my gimmick if I happened to admit that I know some of the card names.
I know what the 8-8 is called. Mark Forge Fiend.
That'll do. There we go. We know the card names. Between us, we both know the card names.
Well,
Can't see a line that works here.
Nope. Well, he can, have a total of 3 taunts on board, right? Because the Bone Chewer, the Annoyatron, and the Grey Bow that's under this Annoyatron. And if levik has no other sources of damage, Dasuap can technically survive another turn. Because 3 taunts, 3 minions, only hero power can go face. But it is a slow and painful march to death, because I just don't see an out for Dasuap, even if he top decks Arbor up as the very next card, because levik can take value trades against all those taunts. They will disappear, but levik's minions will be retained. Also, levik's at a casual 50, plus the 8 he'll get from the Forge Fiend, plus the lifesteal he'll get from this 5/5.
Yep. He must be running a bit thin on things actually to do in his deck at this point. No, never mind. There's an Arbor up just to prove me entirely wrong as always, and that will tidy it up.
It's still not lethal, right? Because he can't get through the Grey Bow as well.
Sure.
He can push 1. But it's hilarious, but it's not lethal the way I see it. I mean, I think Dasuap can throw it down. We know there's no outs. But levik's just thinking to himself, is there anything that I have missed? I am looking through the deck list, checking it once, checking it twice. There's nothing. Even an Arbor up for Dasuap will not do anything against all these minions.
Dasuap settling in, don't see much of him on stream very often, so absolutely just take every minute to settle yourself down. He's looked pretty calm in this game, but hasn't really had much to do after that start from levik. I guess it is game number 2, so he's already had a bit of time to settle down. I forget we jumped into this at game number 2.
Indeed, levik already taking a win even before we joined him, and now he's 1 win away from going up 5-0 in the Swiss. Only needs to get a win on that Rogue, which is of the weapon variant. We've been seeing a fair distribution of Garrote versus weapon, but I think a lot of players have been favoring the weapon Rogue just for the power of Shadow Step with the Bloodsail Raider with Mr. Smite, and we've known since the beginning that weapon Rogue can draw very, very consistently. It all just snowballs so quickly once you get one Spine Tusk Shank on board. You can stick the Silverleaf Poison, your cutting classes get very cheap, your secret passages, you can play every single card off of it a lot of the time, and so you are very likely to find the Mr. Smite. But it all depends on first having a weapon in the early game.
Yeah, and just the addition of Mr. Smite to several of these decks in this tournament has just led to see so much damage output, even when it is just chilling largely on its own as a pretend Leroy, or not so pretend Leroy at times. Again, with any synergy, it makes it that much better. We see those Bloodsail Raiders thrown in, but just damage output in general, and we're seeing that in the speed of the rounds in this tournament has gone up through the roof with Mr. Smite.
Definitely has. It is funny that I thought this card would maybe be the aggro card to keep some of the combo decks in check, but it's also just been put in all the combo decks and above them as well. Pretty funny that. But other things to note in this list, I suppose, is the double Octobot. We're seeing certain weapon rogue players swear by only one of them because there are certain panouts where the weapon rogue doesn't even accumulate a big hand that they want to discount necessarily. Not quite sure where I stand on it just yet, but there's definitely enough weapon synergy in here that I think the list is still very strong. We did discuss a while ago that the Bloodsail Raider is in there to take advantage of your high attack weapons. You can Shadow Step it so it can essentially attack twice with your Mr. Smite Charge Aura in play. But I do think it would struggle versus the likes of Aggro Druid, which tend to get on board a lot more efficiently, much more quickly, and they get taunts to stop all of those charging minions and the weapon damage going face.
I mean, nobody liked Self-Sharpening Sword anyway, did they? So there's a natural slot or two available in the deck to start putting some more damage in there. It was always like the backup plan weapon. Sure. So, yeah, getting rid of that I don't think has made any rogue players particularly sad.
Dasuap with the 3 keep, though, it is powerful synergy he's looking at. And this is certainly a deck where you can just coin out Oracle of Elune on 2 and have it be, you can be very confident that it will stick if levik has not, developed a minion of his own in the early game, of which there are very few for weapon rogue. The Oracle of Elune can quickly run away with the game. But as for the turn 1, Dasuap is faced with the decision of Squirrel versus Druid of the Reef. I'd be looking at the Druid of the Reef for taunt just to make sure that there can be no shenanigans whatsoever to mess with the Oracle on the turn after. But Dasuap goes with the Squirrel instead, and he has now Druid for Rush plus Adorable Infestation to take down the Octobot in one shot. So that's definitely the upside of holding on to the Druid of the Reef.
Yeah, the nod there of a person who's having a bit of a bad series. Oh, yeah, of course you've got the Octobot nod. But even without the Octobot, I mean, levik just being able to use an excuse to put the dagger into plays. You don't want to do it. If you can do it and actually have some use with it, that would have been nice. But Dasuap was ready.
Indeed. Holding on to that Druid of the Reef as a potential answer for the Octobot, not getting baited into going all in on the Oracle of Elune game plan. Definitely has been around the block a couple of times with this matchup. levik can fight back a little bit on board with the Bloodsail Raider into Prize Plunderer. Obviously not the ideal usage of Bloodsail Raider, but you have to make some compromises. In an aggro matchup, you're not going to live to the point where that's going face 2 times for 8 damage. You simply need to stop the bleeding and make the aggro druid not run away with it in the early game, but Dasuap with the Park Panther is indeed still going to run away with it.
Yeah, not particularly, and again, not saying it's a mistake because he was forced into the corner, but not really the best use of the Plunderer either, just pinging off 1 damage, but something he was absolutely forced into doing. And
forced into using Poisons on not a good weapon, which is always an awful feeling for weapon rogue, but he's just trying to not die until he can find Swine Tusk Shank or something of the like. But Dasuap is giving levik very little room to breathe here. Double Peasants, honestly the least of levik's problems.
Yeah, cutting class is going to have to be amazing here, otherwise the not dying plan might not actually be on the table for much longer. Which is concerning, because that's the whole point of the game.
Arbor up, going to buff everything here, and he can push a lot of damage. Not lethal, yeah.
A technical load of damage. And so levik is going to need cloaks after cloaks upon lots of card draw upon, I don't even know at this point how he gets around all this.
Yeah,
and nor does he.
Possible.
And Dasuap gets it back to 2-1 in pretty fast time. That was just a few seconds that game, it felt like. Getting that opener and getting rid of the Octobot, being ready for that, the only real highlight in that particular game.
Indeed. It is truly a miserable matchup for the Rogue, and just the fact that the Druid of the Reef was added to Aggro Druid's arsenal and actually allowed them a way to deal with Octobot on curve. Usually Octobot on curve, like you don't have the mana yet to go for Park Panther, which used to be the only way to one-shot it from off-board as Aggro Druid. Now they have that additional answer, right, of the 2-card combination of Rushing Druid of the Reef and Adorable Infestation, and that locks out any small percentage that levik may have had at the beginning. But Dasuap definitely queued up his best matchup there. Going to have to scrap a little bit more now as the Quest Warrior. I still think that this has got a great matchup versus the Weapon Rogue because you still also do have a lot of early game minions. But it is not the pure aggro version that I favor if I am going to run like none of the defensive tools. There's still a Barov in here, there's still a Provoke, but fair enough, a lot of people just kind of want to have that in their back pocket in order to make sure that they can deal with mirrors or druids that hit the absolute nuts with Anaconda. Overall, I don't think those 2 cards are going to hurt the favorability of the matchup too much at all.
Yeah, this is the when I tested, I sort of tend to just pull a list at random and test that variant, so at least I know roughly what's going on, and this is the exact list that I tested. And the Barov, I mean, it does get to do the thing against the druids sometimes, but it's so annoying that it doesn't have the word pirate on it that personally I'm not a fan of it either. Getting a bit different from ladder to tournament play. Sometimes you spot a weakness in your lineup and maybe it covers that particular weakness, so you just want to have one out in it.
The Shiver Their Timbers huge here to take down the Octobot, once again denied of the Frenzy potential, and levik already behind on board. He can get rid of the Harbor Scamp with the Paralytic Poison, but again, these are poisons used on not Swine Tusk Shank, and that already feels like a bit of a concession for the Weapon Rogue. Whereas Dasuap, he can keep curving out here with the Freebooter just as the highest health minion individually that can be played this turn. I'm a big fan of that.
Yep, the big numbers, put them out there, especially in a situation where Plunderer can actually kill some of the small things. 1, 2, 3. Might get a chance to kill this, actually.
Yeah, very likely. Oh, he's going Silverleaf on 1 charge of a weapon. That I did not expect necessarily. I thought he was going to drop down the Bloodsail Raider alongside the Prize Plunder, but he just wants to get the card draw immediately, I suppose.
Yeah, one thing the Pirate deck does do, and it does a lot of damage very fast, is Captain is so dangerous, does so much extra damage. And there is this turn 4, it's not even a major issue, but there's a lot of 3s and 2s in this deck. So sometimes the 4-mana turn, sometimes, not happening here, can just slow down very temporarily for the Warrior. But no, not this time around. Absolute maximum value out of this turn. And levik in a spot of bother.
Oh, the cloaks this early are just terrible. He hasn't seen a Swine Tusk Shank or a Secret Passage. I'm already going to chalk this one up as an L for levik, and I don't see it. Look at Dasuap's hand. He's just got all of the pirates. He's got the quest completion, turbo out, and he's got the South Sea Captain to make all the pirates resilient as well. And levik's already down a Prize Plunder. There's just no way he can deal with the board. He can delay his death with the cloaks, but eventually he's going to get clocked in the head for 1,000,000.
Yep, playing this cloak to defend 6 damage looks a bit weird when there's stuff coming up later on. But the fact is, in the world where he somehow wins this game of Hearthstone, one of the turns coming up before the second cloak, he's actually going to have to spend mana, and that cloak will no longer be available. This isn't one of those turns, and Dasuap back in it at 2 games apiece. It's all going to come down to game number 5.
2 miserable matchups back-to-back for this weapon rogue from Levik to have to face up into. Like, clearly, the lineup was not built to deal with aggro, right? Levik is the type of player who was hoping to run into more warlocks, perhaps. And that happens to be Dasuap's last deck in contention, right? It is a hand lock, not quite the turbo quest lock with all of the anti-aggro capability with the Grimoire of Sacrifice, but still, I'd imagine, a very good matchup for the weapon rogue. No Vipers to be seen, no way to fight back necessarily against a Swine Tusk Shank. There's a Baron Scavengers, of course, which can provide taunt a little bit later on, but I don't even know if Dasuap can make it to that 10-card breakpoint if Levik finally finds a timely weapon.
Yeah, all the way back to sort of the start of Season 2 of GM, when we saw the weapon rogue, it was mainly to deal with basically this Warlock deck, give or take the thousands of iterations it's had since then. And not much has changed in that time. It is still an incredibly tough matchup for the Warlock. Just while we get into this, little bit of news from around the floor. We mentioned that Glory was 5-0, Fury Hunter 5-0, Pun 5-0, Shouty
Wow.
5-0. There's some big names rising to the top of this tournament.
You love to hear it. I think we could be in for a very exciting top 16 Fury Hunter with the hopes of the back-to-back Masters Tour wins, and Glory with the hope of the back-to-back World Championship wins, as we'll see him later this year. But for now, Levik has found the Swine Tusk Shank, and boy, has he got a good supporting hand to go along with it. The Shroud of Concealment also kept to make sure that the card draw can keep rolling. Whereas for Dasuap, the early hand is not great. There's no backfire, no tour guide. Cult Neophyte maybe is useful a bit later on versus Weapon Rogue, but right now, it's going to take a while to get any measure of threatage online.
Threatage. Yeah, if he was going to find the Shank in only one of these 3 games, this is the one he would have chosen to get it in, just to solidify that advantage and just say, okay, the aggro decks might have beaten me anyway. This one's a lot, sort of, the only way you lose if you don't get the Shank. Not quite, but feels like that sometimes.
I do love the option to prep Swindle rather than the Shroud, just for the chance of finding Silverleaf Poison, which is kind of the only missing piece of the puzzle for Levik here. He does have card draw with these 2 spells, but you'd much rather have the stacking card draw on the weapon to make sure you can milk the most value out of each and every swing. Doesn't quite find it here, but he is going to go for the Paralytics, at least to start the damage train rolling. I don't mind delaying the Shroud of Concealment by 1 turn, even if he misses a bit of mana efficiency, because what he's going for here is damage efficiency, which is arguably even more important against Warlock.
Yeah, you limit the Warlock's choices, you limit their tapping, you limit them, you force them to heal when they don't want to heal, that sort of thing, just by pushing this early damage. And so I'm in agreement with you there. The value will come later. You've got the damage equipped. Now you can Shroud worst case next turn if you feel you must.
Speaking of mana inefficiency, Dasuap already kind of resigning himself to playing a Goldshire Knoll off curve just to start counter-threatening in any relevant form. The Prize Plunder for Levik can be played here just to get rid of the 1-1. I'm not necessarily sure if he wants to hold on to it because I'm not seeing a great way to juice it up with this current hand. It looks to me like the Shadow Step wants to be saved for Bloodsail Raider to go alongside Mr. Smite, right? Because he's already looking at tons of burst damage on turn 6. If he just plays Raider next turn and bounces it back, that can come back as, what, a 6 attack charging minion alongside Mr. Smite, or you can save it a bit later on if Dasuap goes for a bit of healing. Currently, though, the only option is Drain Soul in terms of defensive potential. So he is just going to keep tapping here, hoping to hit, I guess, Altars of Fire to make sure he can then get to the 10-card breakpoint and start putting some taunts in the way, but nothing of the sort has appeared for Dasuap.
Yeah, several advantages of doing nothing last turn as well for Levik is any of the healing would have to target Dasuap's own minions, and also, obviously, you get a more efficient Octobot by having more things in your hand and just continuing that pressure. I'm really enjoyed seeing how that one worked out.
Bit scary for levik this turn though, because we are going into turn 6 for Dasuap, and Battlegrounds Battlemaster is representing lethal on this board state, so levik is going to pull back a little bit, gets rid of 1 gold Charnel, and leverages the immune he gets from the paralytic poison. Also discounts the Octobot, so he still has access to smite Bloodsail Raider, step Bloodsail Raider next turn.
Yeah, I was just checking that was lethal myself. It absolutely is if there's no healing takes place. Which is ridiculous, I'd like to say.
It is, yeah. It's 18 burst damage from the minions alone, plus the 4 from the Shank, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that happened. If levik likes, he can even just drop the other Octobot here, and it either soaks 5 damage, or in some worlds actually gets procced, and then he can push even more damage. But it looks like he's stepping the Prize Plunderer instead here to play around. You'd have to imagine a taunt happening here, Baron Scavenger maybe.
Well, he also gets to still play 2 Bloodsails next turn anyway, because he gets to play the Octobot and the Prize Plunderer next turn.
Ooh, that is a very good spot. So he's not actually gutting his own damage potential by going for the step Prize Plunderer, but he gives himself some flexibility as to whether he needs to use that on an Octobot or an opposing minion. Very cool spot.
Yeah, levik playing very nice in those sort of niche situations, it looks like, in this event so far. The two things he did, getting the 9 drop earlier on, going for the lethal against the Druid, and now this play. These are plays that, sure, you can spot them if you're told to look for the play, but he's just doing them naturally. It's really cool to see.
But from Dasuap's position, he's just seen the Octobot, he's seen a step Plunderer. Surely he smells that something is up, but what can he do to stop it? There's just 6 mana, 6/6 taunt is the most defensive thing he can do, but that certainly doesn't feel like winning the game. He's going for the Altar of Fire here to try and find another way of thinning the deck and getting to play the Baron Scavenger for 1 mana. But doesn't quite find any way of doing that. Goes for the Cult Neophyte. That is going to be the game. No spells needed for levik to push tons of damage here.
His eyes just went so wide when he saw, oh, my opponent thinks I have spells. Unlucky. And yeah, he is going to get this turbo lethal here for a lot of damage. Dasuap knows what is up. And levik is going to advance to 5-0.
Very impressive stuff. This Weapon Rogue showing the power of the Pirate synergy, showing that it's not just Garrote Rogue that you can bring to have success with Valeera. It did get a little bit scary for levik there, because the Rogue really looks helpless in a lot of these aggro matchups, and that's already accounting for the Hunter ban. But the Warlock truly ended up proving to be the weak link in Dasuap's lineup. Looking at it overall, in Conquest theory, though, it doesn't quite make sense, I think, to bring Handlock with 3 aggro decks, but it could be that Dasuap just couldn't find a 4th deck that he was comfortable with, which is a sentiment that a lot of players have echoed, right? They've heard players like Luna saying, I have 3 decks I like and a black sheep. For levik, though, the lineup does seem to have at least 3 out of 4 decks a bit more synergy in a sense, but it's still not full combo. So I'm really interested to see what kind of lineup will reign supreme at the end of Undercity. Is it going to be 4 combo decks, 4 aggro, or somewhere in between?
Yep, looking forward to seeing that as well. And we must remind you that the nerfs only took place on Tuesday. Some people will have a not amazing amount of time to test with that, maybe bring just your comfort picks, maybe not wanting to recreate an entire new meta in 3 days and just bring the decks you're comfortable with, especially when deck number 4 is just a big issue in this tournament. So not saying that's what he did, absolutely, there may have been totally different reasons for it, but feel that a lot of the players who we don't know so well have just brought decks that they know and are good at.
And you can't fault anyone for that when there are so many different viable